What is up, my friends and fellow busy bees? I gave a little sneak peek last week into what today's episode was going to be about, and I wanted to talk about expectation setting because I know for me, the reframing of this and just thinking through it a little bit more over the last few years and reflecting on my thoughts, my patterns, myself in general has been really helpful for me to change my perspective and to honestly chill the fuck out and live a much more calm, peaceful, and enjoyable life with a lot more positivity and harping on the negative stuff a whole lot less. So I hope you find a couple nuggets today that speak to you and can help you to move forward in a similar trajectory if you so choose. Now, if I had to guess, I would assume that a lot of this change and this thought process and reflection has just happened inherently over the years of me leaning into a lot of the, self-help, motivational, self-development, whatever you want to call it, type of content. I know some of it can be a little bit woo-woo and, I pick and choose who I listen to or who I seek out content from. But I do think, generally speaking, as long as you're able to maintain an air of kind of critical thinking and being rooted in reality still, I think it could be helpful. And I certainly don't think it's adding any harm to people compared to any of the other stuff that can show up in your algorithms throughout the day. Like, I don't know, if you end up on the wrong side of TikTok or Instagram, things are pretty grim over there. So when I scroll through and I see a little bit of toxic positivity, I'm like, you know what? Lesser of two evils. But I really like that I can pick and choose what speaks to me with this type of content in terms of when I'm scrolling on socials or the podcasts that I seek out or the books that I read and that kind of stuff. There'll be little tidbits that speak to me and that kind of catch my attention, catch my curiosity, and really make my gears start turning and reflect on myself and my experiences or the way that I approach the world. And then sometimes there's just a certain quote that maybe hits a point in a way that I've never thought about it before. A lot of the times, those are the things that are turning into Mel's motivational messages because I'll write them down not only for myself to go back to and to reflect on and to look at and reconsider, especially as time evolves and I evolve over time, those things can mean different things to me or can bring up different aspects of life or reflections depending on where I am in life. So I've really enjoyed it and I have reflected over time on how kind of just inherently negative the world is by default. If you look at the people around you, the content that you consume, the messaging that you see, the chances are a lot of it is rooted in the negative or has a tendency to lean towards the negative. Firstly, because I think humans are just kind of hardwired to notice that stuff first, to talk about that stuff first. If we think evolutionarily, it makes sense. Years and years ago, caveman era, whatever, the first people who were here, they were looking for threats to their safety, to the continuity of the human race. They were having to be aware of predators and major weather events and other tribes that were potentially attacking them and plants that were going to kill them. And so they were looking for things that were out of the regular, out of the routine, the day-to-day. They were looking for these negative things and they were talking about them and discussing them because that was the thing that was going to ensure that they didn't die off. So it makes sense, but fast forward to present day and we live pretty comfortable lives in comparison. We live extremely comfortable lives in comparison. Let's get real. We can go to a store to get food whenever we want. The prices of the food might be a bit more pricey than they used to be, but it's there, it's stocked. The majority of the time, you probably have the money to purchase it. There are resources available, if not, to provide you that for free or at a lowered cost. There are stores that have clothes that we can purchase that are already sewn for us. There are retailers that will send those clothes directly to our doorstep. The doorstep of the house that we rent or we own that is a solid structure that's most likely insulated, that has a roof above our heads that most likely doesn't leak, over a bed that's probably fairly comfortable. There's no lions that are trying to attack you or bears that are lurking and gonna eat your family. You're probably not suffering from the bubonic plague. Life's pretty chill when you think about it that way, isn't it? You might have to do a two-factor authentication when you sign into your Netflix account, and that might slow you down from binging the latest reality television. But you have clean drinking water probably, so you really gotta focus on the good because it is pretty good. So that tendency to notice the negative or to lean into the negative or to endlessly discuss the negative things in life isn't really an evolutionary advantage to us anymore. And in fact, I would argue that it's actually quite the disadvantage mentally at a bare minimum. And so for myself, I know that when I personally focus on the positive and remind myself of things to be grateful for and lean into that gratitude and just acknowledging the good things that exist, those things become so much more prominent in my life. I start to notice them more. I'm able to be grateful for them more. Things that a lot of people may take for granted or just not even acknowledge as being all that substantial, because it's easy to overlook, I understand, especially if you've always lived in a society that had those comforts. You haven't really had to struggle financially, or you haven't had a lot of health challenges or suffered with anything mentally. If things have been pretty calm and steady and even keel, you may not necessarily take the time to acknowledge those things, but that doesn't mean that those things aren't still there and those aren't pretty fucking amazing to have in your life. So not only do I think that it's good to steer clear of the negative stuff, but I think it's a great idea to also take stock of and focus on the positive things in life. And I find that a lot of the time, regardless of the situation or the context that you're in, the thing that can make us unhappy in life or that can force us or result in us having negative feelings towards things or negative outbursts and just ruining our day overall is due to something that we actually have total control of. And that's our expectations about whatever that thing is. And control is a funny thing, and I've talked about it before. I love it. I love to have it. Of course, it's great to be able to anticipate what's going to happen in life, feel like you have some sort of control over it and you are making it happen in a way that is conducive to your happiness, to your preferences, whatever it may be. But there are a lot of things out of our control. And it can feel like there are a ton of things that are out of our control, especially when it comes to social media that are putting, the realities of the world in our faces. And sometimes false realities, sometimes misinformation and stuff like that, but also just things are in front of our face now that weren't necessarily when I was really young growing up and when older generations were growing up especially. So that can feel unsettling and that can feel very chaotic and not great if you're someone that enjoys having control over things, because these public events and other people's opinions and decisions that are being made in the world and all these things that you don't have control over, the changing environment, the political landscape, whatever it is that is important to you, that may be something that is changing. It might feel bad to you. It may not be where you want it to go, and that might not feel great. And when you bring that purview a little bit closer to home, the things that you interact with day to day may also be out of your control. Like I said, the weather, the people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, the people you pass on the street, their thoughts, their feelings, their actions. Those are things that you can't control, unfortunately. Sorry to break it to you. But these are things that we generally do not have the ability to take control of, because people have their own agency, and that's kind of a great thing. But that can mean if you have expectations that are maybe not aligned to other people's expectations or desires or needs, that you may end up disappointed or sad or mad or angry about the reality that they choose to make happen. And obviously different events can be perceived differently, but ultimately our perception is our reality. The way you see things is how you're going to interpret the world around you, and that's how you're going to internalize things that are happening. We don't always know intentions or the backstory of things, but however we perceive that thing to be or to have happened is going to change how you experience the world and the things that are happening in the world. So that means if you change your expectations, then your perception of the world around you will change, which is a great thing because our expectations are something that we absolutely 100% of the time have control of if we are intentional about it. Because think about it. So if I'm moving through the world assuming that everybody knows what I want and what I'm expecting to get out of this day or this situation or this activity that I'm in, and they know what I need, if I'm assuming that, then when those things are not fulfilled or those expectations are not met, I'm going to be let down. And I'm going to be sad or I'm going to be mad or I'm going to feel unfulfilled. But what's missing from that whole equation is the fact that people cannot read minds. Half the time, I don't even know what I want or what I need myself. And couple that with the fact that, like I said, it's so much more inherent and easier in the path of least resistance for us to feel things in the negative sense rather than trying to force or to create positive thoughts and feelings. So there's a bit of a misalignment there. The math isn't mathing, if you know what I mean. So it's important to do what we can to keep those things in check, to control these expectations that are, like I said, within our control, and to stabilize them in the healthiest way possible. So then we're better able to handle the things that life throws at us that we don't have control over, that will inevitably come because our expectations will have been set appropriately and we will have been setting those expectations and reevaluating those expectations and questioning those expectations so much so that we'll already have that skill, that capability within us to take a beat and to reframe the things that are out of our control that are happening and to look at our expectations of them and ask ourselves if there's a way for us to look at them differently. So this is so much easier to think about if we think of it in more tangible examples. And like I said, this is something that's seeped into all areas of my life. So I want to give a few different places that I can think of that I have noticed a difference and I have created a difference. Some of which will be furniture refinishing and furniture refinishing business related, but a lot of them are just in my day-to-day life, but in turn changes who I am and how I show up as a business owner and as someone, putting myself out there online and stuff like that. So it's all interconnected, but today's a little bit more of a personal episode because I feel like this mindset piece is ultimately really beneficial for people, and like I said, it will impact all areas of your life anyways, so it does end up helping you on the business front for sure. So one thing that a lot of people struggle with, and at times I have found myself falling into to a certain degree, is road rage. Because, you know what? Sometimes people don't drive the way I want them to drive, and they don't follow the rules of the road in the way in which I expect them to. Can you relate? Have you ever seen that before? So, I used to spend a lot of time sitting in rush hour traffic going to and from the office. I am very thankful to no longer have to do that. But when I was doing it, there was a point in which I realized that at 2 different points in my day, pretty much every day, I was putting myself into a shit mood because of something that I had no control over, because of something that I knew inevitably would probably happen in my day, and yet I still was falling into the trap of being annoyed at it, getting rattled at it, and getting rattled at the people around me who a lot of the times weren't acting in a way that I had control over, and my expectations weren't well aligned with the situation that was repeating over and over again that I knew I had to be a part of, which was showing up for work. And the reality is, the way that my city was planned out was not very conducive to the amount of people who now live in said city and the amount of people who were going to the downtown core to work in a government-heavy city where all the government buildings were downtown. So it was just a reality of my life. However, the rattledness was coming from the fact that I was expecting everyone, well, I was hoping that there wouldn't be traffic, A. Bad idea. Because the reality was, I knew that that was going to be the case, and I should have expected it to happen so that my expectations would have been met day in and day out, and then there wouldn't be any resistance to that fact. Problem number one. Problem number two is that I expect people to be perfect. Is that a realistic expectation? No, it is not. Am I myself perfect? No, I am not. So that is not a realistic expectation. And yet, the fact of the matter that I would get fired up at someone for not living in that perfection showed that I must have had that expectation for that person, because when they didn't meet my expectation of perfection, I got annoyed or angry or whatever it was. And maybe that was rooted in the fact that I wanted to protect my asset, which was my vehicle. I wanted to protect my safety and the safety of anyone in the car. I myself am following the rules for the most part. So I societally expect other people to follow the same rules, because if we all play the game, then, the game goes well. Whatever it may be. At the end of the day, I was annoyed. Maybe other people were annoyed, and maybe other people were annoyed by my actions too, because like I said, I'm not perfect either. So, although your expectation doesn't have to be that people are obviously dumb and useless and cruel and selfish, and so I inherently expect that they're going to do things that benefit them and break the law and not know how to drive properly and whatever other thing that you can think up, and just anticipate all that bad stuff. But what I could do to reformulate that expectation is expect that people will be human, and thus they'll be fallible, just like I know that I am at times. So I can instead approach this commute to and from work and approach the world with a more generous spirit and outlook and perspective, and give people the benefit of the doubt that I would hope that they would give to me in the times when I maybe forget to signal when I'm switching lanes, or I accidentally cut someone off because they were in my blind spot, or whatever the thing is, right? It's like, treat people the way you would like to be treated. I know, obviously so plain and like, duh. But when I make a mistake and I mess up, if I would expect the generosity of a stranger to not get rattled at me and to understand that I made a harmless mistake, then I also should be giving that generosity to the people around me. If we think about it, if I want to see something that's happening in that situation and give the benefit of the doubt and ask myself, what's the most generous explanation that I can give to this person who just did this thing? Maybe they're distracted. Maybe they're listening to a great podcast or audiobook and, their mind wandered for a minute. Maybe they are a newer driver and they're not confident on the roads, or they don't know the laws of the road, or whatever. Maybe they're just really tired. Maybe they had a really long day. Maybe they were up early. Maybe their kids were sick last night, so they were up all night and they're tired, and you caught them in a second when they zoned out for a minute. Maybe that was literally the first mistake that they have ever made in their whole goddamn life while driving, and it happened to be in front of me or in relation to me as a driver. And so then I'm going to look at them and I'm going to hate their guts and think that they don't know anything that they're doing and whatever. No. Because if I'm going to react, now, I will say, I say road rage, quote unquote, but that's more just me being pissy in my own head. I'm not someone that, outwardly gets rattled and, starts screaming at people, flipping them off, following them, whatever. I'm not, aggressive in that way. But when I'm having those thoughts, that's putting me in a shitty mood. That's maybe spiking my own cortisol and my adrenaline levels needlessly. If I were someone that was more reactive, I could be ruining that person's day and putting them in a bad mood, and who knows how that has a butterfly effect on the people around them throughout the day. If I'm in a bad mood, who knows how that has an effect on the people around me later on in the day, and so on and so forth. So you can see how just that one quick little reframing, not that it's simple to do, not that it's natural to do, but if I can take a beat when I notice those thoughts popping up and I see that my brain's going there, to try and reframe it in that way and change, first, ideally, my expectation going into that situation, but also, if I don't catch it at that point, then my explanation for the situation and reframing it in a more generous way, I kind of see that as a win-win. I don't see anybody coming out of that situation more negatively than they would have otherwise. I don't see anyone getting hurt. A little bit more brain power used on my end, but let's be honest, a little extra brain power didn't hurt anybody in this world of technology and ease and comfort that we live in. So just changing those expectations can make a world of a difference. And just in that one tiny little microcosm of me driving in my day-to-day, changing that has changed my whole outlook on driving in general. Because although I'm not sitting in the rush hour traffic anymore, and that does have a big thing to do with how much I enjoy driving, I'm not going to lie. However, I do understand that there are things within my own control that I can do to reframe and also just to put a more positive spin on those things that I don't enjoy, you know? I listen to podcasts when I drive. I'll listen to an audiobook when I drive. If I'm driving with my husband, that's when we have a lot of really great life talks and just chats about things that we don't always get the time to talk about when we're running around at the house. Like, there's ways that I can put a more positive spin on that I can change things around and ultimately turn that thing into a much more enjoyable, positive experience overall in my life. So I welcome you to do the same, either with that or with other things that you find that you're having a bit of a sour taste in your mouth when you think about, when you approach, when you are coming up to something on your calendar that, you know, you're always doing and you're like, oh, I have to do that thing again. Like, really think about those things and why do I have that negative connotation to that thing? Why am I expecting it to be so horrible and negative? Why am I doing that thing if I hate it so much? Like, is it something that I have to do? Is it something that I feel I have to do or that I feel obligated to continue to do? Or am I just blindly doing it for no good reason at all and I could cut it and use that time better doing something else? It's all about reflection, my friends. It makes a big difference if you start to do it and you take the time and you don't numb your brain all the time with whatever it is that you enjoy numbing your brain with. We all have our things, but if you take the time to really sit in your thoughts and reflect on these things, it can truly change so much about the way that you live your life. And I always try and catch myself in these episodes because I don't want to sound preachy. I don't want to sound like I feel like I have it all figured out because I certainly do not. But I do know that over time, there are small things in my day-to-day that I have improved that I feel are hopefully good to share and hopefully are helpful for at least one of you out there so that it doesn't fall on deaf ears. But if nothing else, at least I know I tried and I did what I could to share the things that have helped me. So there you go. Another way that this expectation setting has come up recently in my life has been when I was talking to a friend of mine about basically like tasks around the house and our husbands. And she was basically talking about how she found that she was catching herself a lot of the time getting resentful and kind of internally pissy about her husband and how much he does around the house, or, you know, he would do a lot around the house, but then in the times that he didn't and he slacked off a bit, she really noticed herself noticing it. And although not wanting to like make a huge deal about it, she was hanging on to a lot of that negative energy and just like internalizing that and getting more and more fired up about it. And was asking if that happened to me, and if not, like, how do I not make that happen? I told her that in reflecting on it, I think it had a lot to do with my expectations. Because, to be honest, I do a lot around the house. My husband found a very good wife, to his credit. I am someone that enjoys cleaning, I enjoy organizing, I enjoy making a house, maintaining a house, cooking, meal prepping, you know, all that stuff. Like, I enjoy it. I truly do. And I like finding new ways of doing it. And I like I said, to do it my way a lot of the time too. So that is something that I over the years have made very apparent, and I set that expectation really early on in my relationship that I was happy to do the majority of those kinds of things, but also made apparent the fact that when I ask for help and when I want things done by my husband, I expect those to get done, and I expect him to kind of like make himself available within a reasonable amount of time to do so, because I do take on so much of it. So through open communication, open and active ongoing communication, we have created that plan, that roadmap forward through our relationship, and that has changed and had ebbs and flows over the, maybe 8 years that we've been together now. depending on what life looked like at the time. So, for example, when we were both working full time and I was doing a lot of Mel did it herself stuff, I had a lot less time to do those household things. So my husband stepped up and we talked about different options for making life easier, doing meal services and things like that. And as long as that expectation was set at the beginning or was communicated at some point in time, that I think was the result of me not harboring a lot of resentment for the work that I did around the house. And again, it's something that I enjoy, so maybe it's not a great example of that. But for me, if I know that I'm the one that's going to be expected to do X, Y, and Z, then I know that that's something on my plate. So when it doesn't get done by somebody else, that's meeting my expectation. And I'm kind of making my husband sound like a piece of shit. I promised that he would do these things if I asked him to help. Just a lot of the time, I have a good system going, okay? I promise. I'm okay. Things are good. I enjoy it. Life is good. But for my friend who never really had that conversation with her husband, and it was kind of just presumed that she would do a lot of this stuff because he's the one that's working, she stays at home with the kids. So stereotypically, a lot of that stuff would fall onto the woman, and presumably it would fall onto the person who's staying at home all day. But if she's not someone that enjoys doing that stuff, it's not something that comes inherent to her to do it, and she didn't grow up doing a lot of that stuff, then there's going to be a little bit of friction there. And if he's assuming that she's going to do it and she's assuming that he's going to do it, their expectations are not well aligned, and they probably are both harboring resentment about the other person when they end up begrudgingly taking on the task that they think that the other person should know that they should be doing. So I think that having those expectations clearly set out and having everybody who's involved in that thing being well aligned on those expectations, I think that can make such a huge difference. And if you're somebody that does furniture refinishing and either does custom work for clients, or maybe you sell your pieces on Marketplace or something like that, there's some expectation setting that we can also do that will ensure that we are a lot more at peace with our interactions with the public, and that can set the expectation at a realistic bar so that we're not having our day ruined by things that really shouldn't be ruining our day. For example, sometimes people are going to, quote unquote, waste your time. The reality is you're going to put work in. Sometimes that's not going to result in a sale. You're going to pursue a lead that doesn't convert. You might send an estimate that doesn't end up moving forward with you. And so that might mean that there's a lot of messages back and forth and emails back and forth and asking for dimensions and quotes and this and that and trying to get all the information from the person. You might be talking to them for literally weeks before you can even get that estimate to that person. Then they see the estimate, it's out of their budget, and they ghost you. First of all, quick little plug that you could save a lot of time if you had a custom intake form. Haven't mentioned it on the podcast in a while, but it is a very handy tool to have that compiles everything all at once. You can just send a link to somebody, they fill it out, and then you have everything that you need to create a custom project estimate. Just a quick FYI, I have a free guide that will help you to make that. I will link it in the show notes of this episode, or you can go to meldiditherself.ca/custom-guide. But at the end of the day, once you create the estimate, it's still time that you have put in or time that you have taken away from doing the actual furniture makeovers that may actually result in money in your pocket. And your time could be wasted by people sending a lot of questions about a listing. Maybe they're sending questions in that are actually already answered in the description of the piece, but they haven't read that thoroughly enough, or they didn't see it for some reason. And then that may not end up even resulting in a sale. That person might just ghost you because they find another piece, or life gets busy and they just aren't prioritizing purchasing a dresser at this point in time anymore. So they fall off the face of the planet. Or you could be working with a custom client who is being really kind of needy and following up a lot while you're trying to work on a piece to ask for updates and ask questions and looking for photos, and you're having to do all this added admin work versus just taking that time to actually get the makeover done on their piece of furniture. So all of that stuff can seem like people are wasting your time or using your time in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise used it. And that can cause frustration, that can cause feelings of resentment, that can cause you to feel negatively about those situations or those clients or whatever. And there can be some incongruency in terms of, clients wanting to do things a certain way. If you're working with them for custom work and you want to do a certain thing on a piece, you know that it's the right thing to do for a piece based on your experience, but the client is really adamant that they want to do something else. You don't think it's going to look good, whatever. At the end of the day, we are there to execute what the client wants. We can give our perspective, our expertise, our recommendations, but they are paying us to do what they want on their piece of furniture. So, if our expectations are not properly met, all of those experiences can result in us feeling resentful, feeling pissy and negative and frustrated and wanting to close our business and give up on furniture refinishing in general, or stop offering custom work, or just ruining your day and making you avoidant or angry or feeling like you don't know what you're doing. Whatever your inclination is, whatever your baggage is, will influence how you feel about that thing and how you react to that thing. However, if we can properly set our expectations ahead of time, that will result in literally none of that stuff happening. And you will move through the world feeling so easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. So how can we do that? First up, we can expect that time, energy, and work will not always result in immediate gratification of money into our pocket. It's just a reality. You're running a business. Sometimes people who are selling products will meet with 100 clients, 100 potential clients, and not one of them will buy their product, but they'll all take up their time. They will all ask a million questions about the thing. Some of them will ask for demos. Some of them will ask for samples. And yet, not $1 may end up in that salesperson's pocket. It's business, baby. Set the expectation. Also, you're a business owner. Business ownership is not always sunshine and rainbows. Set the expectation. Also, you are not God's gift to earth in the furniture refinishing space or otherwise. Set the expectation. Sometimes you're going to have to work to get your pieces sold. The economy isn't great. Set the expectation. Your pieces may not sell overnight. Not everybody's looking for refinished furniture. Set the expectation. Some people are always going to look for a deal and negotiate no matter what the price is. Set the expectation. Some people don't have great etiquette online and will not take the time to rewrite their message 14 times to make it sound polite and warm and complimentary, and it will just sound curt and rude and short and to the point to get the information that they need. Set the expectation. Do not let it ruin your day. Do not let it change your outlook on the human race. Do not let it change your mood or how you behave moving forward in the day. Don't rant about it on social media. I guess rant to it to your significant other or whatever if you really need to get it out. But at the end of the day, you're putting more time, you're putting more energy, you're putting more negative power to that thing than is required and then will ultimately change anything about that situation anyways. Set your expectations ahead of time that these things will happen. And then when they happen, your expectations are met. You're at neutral ground. If you can reflect, if you can change these expectations truly, a lot of people will say, I'm about to change your life, but if you implement it consistently in all areas of your life, if you're really intentional with it and you uphold it, this truly kind of can change your life, or at least your experience of how you are living your life. And I have found it to be for the better, personally, myself. That's just me. Take what you need, leave the rest. But remember that expectation setting is perception setting. And your perception is your reality. So what kind of reality do you want to live in? What kind of world do you want to live in? How do you want it to feel? How do you want it to look? Set the expectations. Thank me later. And something you may not know about me, I love little motivational messages. They always get me fired up, and I keep a running list of ones that are exceptionally catchy and ones that speak to me in the Notes app on my phone. So I end every podcast episode with one that I've noted down over the years so that you can leave your time here each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on whatever may come your way this week. This week's Mel's motivational message is from Tony Robbins, which is, where focus goes, energy flows. So if you're focusing on the negative, if you're focusing on the shitty things that are happening in your day and how shitty everyone around you is and how shitty life is and how everything is going to absolute shit, guess what? You're going to feel like shit. Well, you may not look like shit, but you're going to sound like shit because you're going to talk like shit. Everyone around you is going to seem like shit. The world is going to feel like it's going to shit and everything's going to be shitty. So where your focus goes, your energy will flow. Focus on being generous. Focus on the positive. Focus on what you are grateful for. Focus on setting those expectations and letting that positive energy flow into it. I hope you find it helpful. All right, that's it for now. I appreciate your time and I will catch you guys next week.